Good night, everybody. Well, it worked for that guy. Right, I mean, hi, good night, everybody. That's true. Oh, man. I mean, it's funny because after Fetterman won, MSNBC, Katie Tur, she's an anchor for the network, she actually said that we should consider John Fetterman as presidential material.
Oh my God.
I'm not joking.
Yeah, liberals are sick.
And you know, as a media analyst, I'm watching this, and I say, no, Fetterman's not so much presidential material. He's more vice presidential material. Because if Joe Biden says, you know, Kamala Harris, this isn't quite working out, I want Fetterman to be my running mate, then you got to think what that yard sign looks like, right? Biden, Fetterman. It's a no-brainer. Wouldn't that be one hell of a ticket? 2024. You know what's funny? If anybody's like recording this right now, we'll play this back in 2032 and be like, holy shit, he was right. Fetterman actually is president. The New York Times just yesterday awarded him one of the most fashionable people on Capitol Hill. Phyllis, right? That's my witness.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, really. That he is one of the most fashionable people on Capitol Hill. So that tells you where we are at this point. Yeah. So anyway, look, I've been having a great time tonight. You guys are all tremendous. Some are very bad influences. I have a rule that I don't drink before I go in front of a microphone. But sure enough, you got 1.5 of me. So congratulations on that over a 3-hour period. It still sound fine, I think. But here's the point, though, that on nights like this when we all gather, and you know, for a couple of years we couldn't gather much at all, right? Except if you live in Florida, of course, New Jersey, we couldn't. But here, you know, under the current governor, you could do that. But I think it's a good time right now to bow all of our heads and think of all those who sacrificed their careers by working for CNN Plus. Let's remember, it lasted, what, 3 Scaramucci's? Right, a Scaramucci is, let's see, he was White House communications director under Trump for 11 days, and yeah, it lasted about 30 days, and that was that. So go figure. Anyway, thanks for having me tonight, guys. This is awesome. I appreciate all the people that went back for seconds and thirds at the buffet and the meeting room for all that time. I have a rule. I don't wait online. It's not my thing. Airports don't agree with me, and buffets don't agree with me. But finally, you cleared, and the food was quite excellent. So we'll talk about me for a little bit, as uncomfortable as that is. I'm a Fox News contributor, which means I can't go on any other networks but Fox. You're exclusive to them. It's kind of a thing. Fox likes to put me on a lot. I'm like the Michael Avenatti of the network, which may be a good or bad thing, you know. And by the way, thank you, by the way, Joanne, Tom, for the, you know, everything that you've given me to this point. You were going to get me an awesome car from the airport to come here with, and the funny thing was, I saw the driver later outside, and the license plates on the car were actually made by Michael Avenatti. You know, so you never quite know what's going on. And you remember Avenatti, right? I mean, this guy was touted on CNN, for example, as a presidential candidate, right? And the guy that has my title, the bald one, well, I guess they're both bald, the bigger bald one on the left, he said, the reason why I'm taking you seriously as a presidential candidate is because you're on cable news so much, which basically makes me a presidential candidate. Fear the future, people. You don't even want to know my platform. So yeah, and the funny thing is that Avenatti did become president of his cell block in the prison that he's in right now. So another great job by the media hoisting, you know, this guy up. It's unbelievable. Anyway, just to get to more things about me. So those of my kids who are, I believe somewhere on the property right now. Thank you. And you know, it's funny. I don't know what you guys did when your kids were born, but our rule was that, okay, we're not going to pick a name because, hey, the relatives all get involved. You know this, right? Particularly the mother-in-law. Like, you share the name, it's going to get shot down no matter what it is, unless it's after them. So, in this case, we said, all right, when Liam is born, for example, on the left, we're not going to pick the name beforehand. We're going to wait for the baby to come out of the womb. We're going to look him in the face, and we're going to say, okay, that looks like a blank, right? So, you know, we're looking. First, the doctor picks up the baby and goes, "It's a boy." I'm like, "Yeah, what a boy!" He goes, "No, that's the umbilical cord. You got to cut that." So, I'm like, I'm half Irish. That was impossible. But okay, that for a second, I was like very proud of him. Anyway, so you know, I look at Liam, and my wife looks at Liam, and my wife says, "That's a Liam. That's an Irish boy right there." I said, "No, honey. You know, I look at that jawline. I look at that face, and I say, let's go, Brandon." Let's go, Brandon. And my wife says, "No, I got a really bad feeling about this." And then when my daughter's born, same thing. She comes out, and I said, "Wow, you know, I think I know what name I want." She goes, "No, let me go first." She goes, "That is Cameron. That looks like a Cameron Concha, another nice Irish name. We got the alliteration." I said, "No, honey, let's name her after your mom. Let's name her Karen." And she says, "Karen?" She goes, "I don't know what it is about that name, but I got a real bad feeling about that too." So can you imagine if it was up to me, I'd have a Brandon and a Karen in my house. You'd have to move to New Zealand or something. I mean, how do you have that? Junior high school would be, you know, just plain horrible, no question about it. So anyway, we got the whole baby naming thing, and that's all well and good. Everybody having a good time so far? Yeah. All right, good. That's what people say when they're trying to buy time to see what else, where they are in the whole speech. Anyway, so my wife is an ER doctor, and hopefully you never meet her. Hey, Dad, you're on a Gertie. Oh, you're Joe's wife.
We're not in New Jersey, we won't meet her.
That's, well, she's here. After that meal, you might.
Oh.
Right? Okay, I'm just saying the ravioli. That's a stopper right there. That was my speech tonight. So all right, so anyway. But it's great being married to a doctor. There's so many advantages around this. I don't know if you guys just think that a defibrillator is just for heart attacks. No. For the creative ones out there, you know what I'm talking about. Friday night is fun at my house, no question about it. But what's amazing about my wife is that her dad had a heart attack when he was 37. They had to have a triple bypass. And it happened when they were just walking the dog, and he collapsed right in front of her. And she was just like looking at him and ran home, and they were able to call an ambulance, and thank God they saved him. And at that point, at such a young age, she says, "I don't ever want to feel that helpless again, and I want to be able to help people when they're in those situations," which is an incredible thought process for somebody that young. So she went, through high school. She ran track and was number 3 in the country actually at one point in the 600 meters, which is quite remarkable. Then she went to Georgetown and she ran there while being pre-med, and you can imagine this. Fortunately, she had a scholarship, but then you have to go through medical school. In other words, you want to be a doctor, as you know, sir. By the time you're 30 is when you finish school, and there's a whole bunch of debt. And at the end of all of it, she got a job, and for the next 12 years paid off her loan, because that's what you do. And meanwhile, we have an administration now that says, okay, for the low price of $1 trillion, we will provide student loan forgiveness to those who, let's say you have $50,000 in debt in loans, it then goes down to $40,000. So great, you're lowering it from $50,000 to $40,000, you just spent $1 trillion to do so. And half of the degrees that we're talking about here are those who are getting graduate degrees or advanced degrees. What do you do when you get those degrees? You become a lawyer or you become a doctor. You know, the type of professions that allow you to pay the loan back. So you see these things from this administration, you say, what are we doing here exactly? Well, we know what we're doing here. Why did they do it? Very easy. It's to buy votes before an election. And then you find out afterwards, it may be unconstitutional, whoops. But, mission accomplished, so to speak, in this sort of situation. So, let me ask you a question of you guys. How many people here, by a yay or a nay, trust the U.S. media? Yay or nay? Nay. I think the nays have it. It's close. It's close, because right now what we've gone from is journalism to activism, right? I mean, it's no longer about journalists getting the story instead of making themselves a story. But as we saw during the past administration, under Donald Trump, that's all it was about, right? And it was done under the premise of, we are here to stop Trump because we're better people, and we're here to save you from him. Save from what, exactly? Save from the fact that we had a border that was effectively closed, that we didn't have fentanyl coming into this country, killing 300 Americans a day, that we had crime not rampant and out of control, and when it did happen, for instance, during the mostly peaceful riots of 2020, then the president actually decided to send in, or wanted to send in the National Guard, and then the mayors in Portland and Seattle said, no, we got it under control. Yeah, you have it under control, right? And you could go on and on. Save us from what? 1.4% inflation? I think I'd take that, because that's where inflation was the last day that Donald Trump was in office. Now, the latest inflation numbers come in, and it's at 7.1%. And I gotta see Joe Biden twerking on national television saying how this is such a great thing. Wow, we really brought it down, right? Brought it down from what? I can't stand this argument that they take credit for slightly correcting a problem, if they can even say that it's due to anything that they've done, that they created, right? In other words, it's like me gaining 60 pounds. And then my wife says, honey, you look like you've gained some weight. This isn't the guy that I married. And I go, you know what, you're right, I'm gonna go on a diet. And I lose 6 of those 60 pounds. And then I go to her and go, you know what, honey? I've never lost so much weight in my life. We're on the right track. And she's staring at me and saying, you're still 54 pounds overweight. You moron. Oh, so that's that. But that's where we are at this point. It's activists. And I'm not gonna put up a picture of the Joys right now, right? But the most ironically named 2 people that have a microphone in front of them, Joy Reid and Joy Behar, right? I'm not talking about that, all right? They're paid to give opinions. They're paid to be provocative. They are overwhelmingly leftist. That's how they operate. I'm talking about people like Gayle King. Who's Gayle King, right? She is the face, basically, of CBS News. She hosts the CBS morning show, she gets all the important interviews, and portrays herself as an objective journalist. When she literally went on vacation with the Obamas, right? And you have pictures like this. Could you ever see in a billion years a Mudd or a Brinkley or a Cronkite taking a picture with anybody like this and being proud of it? Of course not. That's what I mean. It's activism becoming journalism at this point. And fortunately, everybody sees through it. Because people say, well, what do we do about this, Joe? I mean, the media is overwhelmingly against conservatives. It's overwhelmingly against the Republican Party. I said, yes. But I'm old enough to remember 2016, and right before the election, The Hill, where I also served as a contributor, or as a columnist, we did a survey of the 59 papers, major newspapers across the country that endorsed candidates, right? And 57 of them, of the 59, said vote for Hillary Clinton. And here's why. And only 2 went to Donald Trump. And what that got Hillary Clinton was a set of steak knives and a concession speech. In other words, people were being told how to vote, and they said, F you, and I'm still going to vote this way. In other words, after all those endorsements and all the media going against Trump, he still was able to overcome that. And you see it in this state in Florida, right? With Ron DeSantis, for example. I mean, DeSantis, he puts forth a bill that's called the Parental Rights and Education Bill. Now, not many people even know that was the name of the bill, because the media decided to call it, based on what Democratic activists were saying, the Don't Say Gay bill. You know, the bill that doesn't have the word gay in it anywhere, in any way, shape, or form. And all DeSantis said was, and this is pragmatic stuff, is that if you have a first grader, like I have, Liam, who I showed you before, or a third grader, like Cameron, like I have, I'm pretty sure I don't want you teaching her about sexual orientation and gender identification. That's it. That's common sense, right? And still, they tried to tear down DeSantis, but he pushed back at a reporter that tried to say otherwise. And Trump, same thing. So you can't do the Romney-McCain thing anymore, or Bush for that matter, George W. Bush, which is try to be friendly with the press and you will get fair coverage in return. That will never ever happen. You gotta punch the bully in the face. And I don't mean that literally, it's Media Matters is here right now. Joe called violence on a journalist. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying rhetorically. That's what we're talking about here. So when we talk about activism, for example, the gentleman on the right from the bottom with the mask on, this is during a Joe Biden town hall before the 2020 election. And it was held on ABC News, okay? So again, I'm not talking about MSNBC, which we know is overwhelmingly liberal. It's supposed to be ABC News. Again, frankly, I thought Peter Jennings was halfway decent, and even if he was to the left, he hit it pretty well, right? But now you have this town hall with George Stephanopoulos, who worked for Bill Clinton as communications director, who was a press secretary at one point. So yeah, let's make him the lead anchor. But anyway, the guy on the right, on the bottom, he asked a question during this. Now remember, the town hall is billed as independent voters asking the Democratic nominee questions about his platform. So who's that guy on the right at the bottom? A former Obama-Biden speechwriter. And you're telling me, now nothing happens by accident, by the way, all right? It's not like The Price is Right and you get chosen out of the crowd and you run up, hey, you won. All these people are vetted beforehand. And you're telling me that ABC didn't do a quick Google search, be like, oh, didn't he work in the administration? That's weird. And then the girl on the top worked for the Democratic National Committee. She also got to ask a question. Yep. That's how these things work. It's all a fixed fight, right? During a CNN town hall, same thing. It's supposed to be an even split of Democratic and Republican voters before the 2020 election. And then you see the questions that happen afterwards, and you see who is aligned with what. 9 Democrats asked questions of Joe Biden, 2 Republicans asked questions of Joe Biden, and the 2 were anti-Trump. Again, it's all a fixed fight, right? And that's what drives people so crazy. Because the CNNs of the world, the ABCs of the world, unlike MSNBC, will insist that, no, they're just objective, and they're just tough reporters asking the tough questions. It's crazy. And then you see the tie, right? And it's not just media, but they have to have some sort of backstop. Right? Something that justifies their reporting on X, Y, Z. And we saw it with the Hunter Biden laptop story, right? Where it was deemed Russian disinformation by the media because guys like John Brennan, who works for MSNBC now, former CIA director, and James Clapper, former director of national intelligence, who works for CNN now, and 51 other intelligence officers said, that laptop, those contents, those emails are absolutely Russian disinformation. Now, when you're an investigator, I'm not a police officer, but I've watched, LA Law and Dukes of Hazzard enough times to know how these things work. And I'm pretty sure that you have to look at the evidence before you can come to a conclusion. And they never saw the evidence as far as Hunter Biden's laptop. They just said, yep, it's Russian disinformation. Why? Well, I had some hair standing in the back of my neck that pretty much indicated so. All 51, all in lockstep. So then the media, the Politicos of the world, New York Times, the Washington Post, can all say, well, these intelligence officers said it. That means it must be true. Yeah, exactly. So it's the whole, we heard so much about collusion after the 2016 election, and this is the collusion that we are talking about here, all right? It is traditional media working with those within the government to make sure that a narrative is set, like, I don't know, Russian bounties on U.S. troops, Donald Trump knew it, and decided to ignore it because he's a pawn of Putin, right? And that's something that Biden was able to actually bring up in the debate, and it turns out, of course we learned after the election, that it was completely and totally untrue. So the intelligence community puts out the story, and then the media runs with it because it's their preferred narrative, right? And that's how that works. And all the networks run with it, as Phil's just said, exactly. And then you have these two. Now look, I'm a happily married man, but I remember when I dated. And I'm pretty sure when I would text with a potential girlfriend, I wasn't talking about what these two were talking about. You know what I mean? Not like, hey, you see that latest episode of Yellowstone? No, these two. It's like, how do we get rid of Donald Trump? Do we have an insurance policy? I hate this. God, is there any pillow talk between these two? Are we sure they slept with each other? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking serious questions here. But the point is, guess where Lisa Page works now? After she was caught lying. After literally there's emails of her saying that I want to make sure through the FBI that Donald Trump never gets elected. She is now, like, I'm a Fox contributor, she's an MSNBC contributor. So not only can you do these things, you get rewarded for it, right? And Peter Strzok is like the Mike Lavinati of the intelligence community because he's on every other day. With Nicole Wallace, former Bush communications director, who now is like the top-rated girl on MSNBC because she'll say whatever it takes to get another contract, just like Joe Scarborough, your former congressman, is doing the same thing on that particular network. Fortunately, there are some Paul Revere's out there, and that would be Elon Musk in this case, right? You know, the guy behind Tesla, right? The guy who voted Democrat his whole life. So we're not talking about like some sort of like staunch conservative who has $1 billion and $1 trillion and wants to take over a social media company so he can control the narrative. He saw a problem, not just a problem, like a devastating one, where you had a social media company that was censoring accounts, suppressing information, de-amplifying, as they put it, and all in the name of protecting the American people from speech that may be harmful to them. And Elon Musk comes along, and he's now changing the whole ballgame by putting it all out there. So you would think the free press would say, wow, this transparency is great. Finally, we're seeing what happened at a social media company that completely and totally was biased against one side in order to keep another in power. Instead, this guy is public enemy number one now. Isn't it funny how that works, right? What's that? Okay. How much you get the trick exactly? I get that. We're gonna have the Q&A after the speech. And that'd be great. Can you throw me a water real quick? I'm dying on the line. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, sure. Yeah, pretty much. Right. My mother passed away 10 years ago, but boy, you're a lot like her. I mean in a good way, like no filter whatsoever. You're like a human Twitter.
Oh.
I mean that in the best way, though, you know that. Yes, exactly. So, we were supposed to be signing books tonight by this best-selling author, and the books are about 30 minutes, 30 miles away, yes. In Fort Myers, right? So, it's all good. I'll sign tomorrow, sure. That'd be great.
We're going to do another event tomorrow for lunch.
Another event? How are your forgery? Is that good? Forgery, can you forge? Okay. Because unless you're on like the 7th hole in the green, yeah, I haven't to see. But it'll be fun. So here's another example of media bias, by the way. All right. And this isn't to talk about me. I don't like talking about me too much, but I understand it, but no, it's for it. But here's what happened with my book. All right. It went to the bestseller list of the Wall Street Journal, the bestseller list of Publishers Weekly, the bestseller list of the USA Today, the bestseller list of Amazon. Amazon's probably the best indicator. You get like live, real reactions, like where's the book? And it went all the way to number 2 at one point. And then the New York Times list comes out. It ain't on there. How can that happen exactly? I worked for Fox Sports before I worked for Fox News, and I'm pretty sure I know how to give a baseball score. Who scored the most runs? In this case, who sold the most books? So HarperCollins was my, you guys okay? Oh, okay, good, that's great. Again, after speech, we can talk about all this. It's great, it's a little distracting. Being up here and trying to talk about this thing. You guys are back and forth. Yeah, I got it. Thanks. Appreciate it. Anyway, thank you for being patient. So, HarperCollins was my publisher, is my publisher. I'm doing another book that comes out next year. And they said, Joe, we know this is not true because there's 2 other books on the bestseller list that are HarperCollins books. We know what their numbers are and what your numbers are, and you doubled both of them. Oh. So, I go to the New York Times, I know the PR guy over there. I'm like, hey, Jordan, what's going on with the book? We know that this sold more than other books on here. It should be as high as number 5. And he writes back some sort of like Kamala Harris kind of like word salad, like, well, you know, we put a lot of factors into considering things in terms of independent book sales and then bookstores and so on and so forth. I said, but doesn't it, if it's a bestseller list, it comes down to most books sold, right? And not a lot of people go to bookstores anymore to buy books. They buy them on Amazon or on BarnesandNoble.com and so on. He goes, well, we have a method. And I'm like, that's fine. So then I went to Molly Hemingway, because she's pretty smart when it comes to the law. I said, I'm like, what's going on with this? Like, do I have any legal recourse here? And she said, well, you got to look up the case 1983, Bettany versus New York Times. I said, all right, what's that? Give it the broad strokes. She said, well, in 1983, the guy who wrote The Exorcist had a #1 book on all the lists I just talked about. The New York Times kept him off. Meanwhile, in his contract, it said that he was going to get like a $25,000 bonus if he made, in his exact words, the New York Times bestseller list. In other words, the other ones don't count. This is the only one that counts. So he sued him. And the New York Times actually had to admit in open court that it's really an editorial decision. It's not about total book sales. So even something as adding stuff up is biased. Isn't that incredible?
It's my fault.
It is my fault. But I hope you read the book, and for those of you who have, I hope, if you haven't actually, I should say this, don't read it like chapter 1 through 22, I think I have, 23. Go right to chapter 12. Because chapter 12 is all about a 19-year-old Joe Biden, who decides, as a 19-year-old, because this is how 19-year-olds think, that he's going to take a summer job while home from college, working as a lifeguard in a predominantly black community to, quote, get to know the black community better. Because again, this is how 19-year-olds think, right? Yes. So he goes there, and on one of his first days there, he decides that he's going to morph from David Hasselhoff into Clint Eastwood. Because this gang member from a gang called the Romans, and this is all real because it's in his book, so it must be real, I guess. And in his memoir, he talks about how the gang leader named Corn Pop, right? Sounds like a cereal, but no, he's actually a gang leader because it's Wilmington, so I guess you don't have the tough name, right? It's not Watts, after all. Corn Pop is going to go up the high dive, and he's going to dive off without wearing the right swimwear, which includes a bathing cap, which apparently was a thing in 1961. You had to wear a bathing cap or else you're out, at least at this point. So Biden says, who the hell do you think you are? Esther Williams, who was like an actress and a swimmer at the time, female. You put a bathing cap on, or I'm gonna kick your ass out of here. Now, why Biden decided to like act that way over a bathing cap, we'll never quite know. Meanwhile, in the pool are all the other gang members playing like, you know, Sharks and Minnows and Marco Polo, whatever else, and they see this, and they're like, oh my God, this lifeguard just basically humiliated our leader in Corn Pop. So, after work, Biden peeks out to the parking lot before he's about to go home, and he sees 4 gang members, including Corn Pop, waiting for him, right? So, you know, you're thinking like, wow, what would old Joe Biden do in this situation, right? Is he gonna morph really into Clint Eastwood and take on these guys? Is he gonna get angrier? Like, what's gonna happen here exactly, right? Because here, again, you have 4 people, including Corn Pop, or 3 plus Corn Pop, waiting for him, and according to Biden, they have what's called long knives, razors in their hands, and they're going to kill Joe Biden, right? Because you don't do that, right? You don't do it in New York, you don't do it in Chicago, you don't do it in Los Angeles. So Biden apparently decides to grab the thing that separates the low end from the deep end. If you have pools, you know what this thing looks like, not very intimidating. Walks out, goes right up to Corn Pop, and says, I'm going to apologize for calling you Esther Williams, but I'm not going to apologize for making sure you wear the proper swimwear. And if you don't do it again, if you do that again, I will kick you out again. And then Corn Pop, according to Biden, looks him up and down and says, okay, we're good here, and walks away. And if you believe that, you believe we're at zero inflation, right? So that's a fun part of the book, no question about it. Yeah, indeed. But anyway, I know you guys had a big meal. I'm sure you want to, you know, get to dessert, maybe more drinks. And by the way, my God, what time is it? Oh, I know all of you want to get home and make sure that you catch Chris Cuomo on News Nation. Yeah, he's actually back on TV. I mean, amazingly, right? That's incredible. Oh man, but when we talk about media bias as well and activism, it's not even about politics anymore. Everything is now woke, right? And the Washington Post, which 5 minutes after Donald Trump was elected, came out with this slogan, democracy dies in darkness, right? And what does that mean exactly? I mean, come on. Well, for instance, look at this headline. And if you can't read it, I'll be happy to read it for you. Shark Week lacks diversity, overrepresents men named Mike, scientists say. This isn't an opinion piece. This is actually real. This was in the Washington Post this last week, and that's the sort of stuff that we're dealing with. It's insane. Yeah. And then we have the case of Miguel Anwar, who is an NBC reporter. Now, do you guys recognize this guy at all? Okay, good. Sometimes when people talk about media, they say, everybody's biased, everybody's activist, everybody's corrupt. There are some good people that got into this business to speak truth to power and just be good reporters. Really, we exist, I swear to God. Including this guy who works for NBC News, right? And he's part of their West Coast bureau. Now, what story did he work on? Oh, right. Paul Pelosi gets attacked in his house. And apparently, it happens at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's the home of the Speaker of the House of the United States, and the security wasn't on, and a crazy person was able to just walk in, but somehow Paul Pelosi was able to call police, and when police arrived, Pelosi then didn't do what I would do, which unless I have nunchucks, I'm getting out of there, all right? The police come, I'm going behind them, and going behind their car and saying, all right guys, you take care of this, thank you. Pelosi, for whatever reason, decided to walk back towards his assailant, which only then was he attacked by the hammer. So then this reporter said, in a report the next day on the Today Show, he says, there are many questions that remain about this according to police. For instance, what was going on during the 30 minutes before police arrived between Pelosi and his attacker? If he's going to attack, why wouldn't he do it then, right? Why didn't Pelosi tell police when they arrived that he was under arrest, and why didn't he leave the home after they arrived? That's all he said to the reporter. Just yesterday, he was reinstated. He was suspended for 3.5 weeks by NBC News. And the report was pulled off the air. When we talk about a fixed fight, that's what's going on. Phil, sure, you want to weigh in? Go ahead.
We'll never know what happens. But my guess, we took a guy from a gay bar. Pelosi is gay.
Right.
Married to a witch.
And now the guy will assassinate Musk?
And now that's what I came to. Do something with him.
Maybe.
Maybe the guy got crazy and did what he did, but why wasn't the alarm on? They have an alarm.
Yeah, they gotta have ADT or the Ring or something, right?
And they have all kinds of security. How did they overlook everything? What happened?
That's a good question. We'll talk about it in the Q&A afterwards. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Yeah. But we saw with Pelosi also clearly that when he was driving drunk just a couple months before, in his Porsche, the guy's 82 years old, he's worth $120 million, he can't just call an Uber X, a Lyft, something. No, he's got to drive his Porsche, he crashes into somebody else, and then we don't see a mugshot for a month, and then he's let off with a slap on the wrist. If any of you left here tonight and decided to get behind the wheel of a Porsche and hit somebody else and injured them, you'd be in jail. That's it. So Pelosi should have been home that night because he probably should have been, in jail. I talk about good reporters here as well, and you have Matt Taibbi and Barry Weiss, and they're the ones who are working with Elon Musk right now to get all the information out as far as Twitter is concerned, right? And they're the ones who are being attacked right now as, well, they're just PR arms of Elon Musk, the world's richest person, when all they're doing is their jobs as reporters, right? So there are some good, by the way, Taibbi's not getting invited to CPAC anytime soon. He wrote for Rolling Stone. Barry Weiss was a columnist, very much left of center for the New York Times, and now they're being treated as, Washington Post even called them conservative columnists. And this is the type of person that you're up against. It's the faceless people that we're talking about. That guy there, his name's Yoel Roth, okay? Yoel Roth. He wrote at one point, while Trump was in office, that there were actual Nazis in the White House. Right there, his own words. And his job now is he's the head of site integrity at Twitter and also on the Health and Safety Council. In other words, he decides who gets censored, who does not. What tweets get taken down, what don't. He worked for the DNC before he went to Twitter, right? And so these are the people, it's not just, Democrats, it's not just this entity, it's the people behind all these places that we don't know about until a Musk comes along. We saw it with Tom Cotton, for example. Now Cotton, former Army, decorated, right? An excellent senator, in my opinion. Presidential material probably, in 8 years from now. And he wrote a column during the summer of 2020 that the New York Times published saying that we should send in the National Guard whenever there is unrest that gets out of control beyond the power of local police. And you look at polls at the time, and it was about a 50-50 split in terms of whether that should happen or not. In other words, that's the perfect combo, right? That's one you debate. That's one, well, I see his point, but maybe we shouldn't do this, and so on. The New York Times, from there, fired the editor who put that into the public space because it was deemed to be dangerous to black employees at the New York Times. In other words, the 1619 Project gal and everybody else internally said, this is dangerous, take it down, get rid of this guy who's only won a Pulitzer and has been here for 20 years, and he was gone, right? All the news is spits in front. Who's this here? No one knows. I didn't know until I read about him. His name is Grant Napier. And in 2020, Napier was the play-by-play guy for the NBA's Sacramento Kings. And he was asked in a tweet by a player, what's your take on Black Lives Matter? And Grant writes back, hey, how are you? Thought you forgot about me. Like a joke, haha. Haven't heard from you in years. All lives matter, every single one. Is that a benign statement? Didn't Martin Luther King say that we're all created equal and judge a man by the content of his character, not by the color of his skin? In other words, that's a very reasonable statement. The Kings fired him within 5 hours of that going on. It's just remarkable. So Donald Trump was supposed to have a major announcement today, and secretly, I was hoping, just for entertainment purposes alone, that he was going to say, you know what? Screw this whole Kevin McCarthy, Andy Biggs kind of fight going on right now. I'll put my hat in the ring for Speaker of the House. 1-year contract, then I'll run for president afterwards, right? But I'll write the right in terms of Congress, and then that could be a good thing. And I'll campaign during that also, and everything's fine, right? So you're going to have Trump with the gavel. Now think about this for a moment, why this would be a great thing for all of us. Because here you would have Joe Biden giving the State of the Union address, right? And he's saying how we've got inflation completely on the run. And crime, it's just a myth. It's a media creation. I've been hard on crime. And the border is secure and closed. And our education system, we're #1 in the world, right? And then behind him, over his shoulder, is the Donald Trump face. The face. Are you kidding me? And at the end, he pulls a Pelosi and rips out the speech. You can die after that and be very happy, like, all right, I'm done, it's good. And then, after that, Trump as Speaker can launch impeachment hearings into Joe Biden. Right? It probably will fail because you need 2/3 of the Senate to go along with it. In other words, you'll get the impeachment, but you won't get the removal, which happened twice with Trump. And then he says, okay, after all that, with all the witnesses back in the world, because now he's done all of this, then he runs for president. Boy, wouldn't that have been fun? But,
Yes, it would.
okay, one can dream indeed.